Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine. I'm a friend of Nellie's, and today she asked me to share a bit with you. So, yeah, happy to be doing that. And what I want to share with you today is just more about God's love and God's grace for you. I think we all have these moments where we doubt, does God really love me? How far does His grace extend? And I hope that today will be helpful for you. This is something that has been really touching to me to discover this more and more in my own life. And I want to just talk about this topic by first reading a story from the Bible, a story that can be found in Luke chapter 15. And this is a story that Jesus told that you might already know, also known as the story of the prodigal son. And today what I want to do is I just want to zoom in on one section of that story, which is the first section. The story itself is actually about two sons, a younger and an older son. And today what I want to do is just look at the first part, which has to do with the younger son. So let's read this story and then we'll go into that. So Luke 15. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" So in a nutshell, what we just heard in the story is this is what happens. A father has two sons, and one son says, "Father, give me my inheritance," which in doing so, he's actually saying, "Father, I wish that you were already dead." That would be a serious enough thing to do in this culture and society in the Netherlands. So that wouldn't go very well. But in a society that valued obedience to one's father even more so, it was a very serious act of rebellion. The son goes off, squanders his wealth, and then when times get rough, he finds himself living in famine and in need. And the story also tells us how he just longed to fill his stomach with the food of an animal that was unclean to Jews, to pigs. So that was a very shameful thing for Jews. And the pods that the pigs were eating might have been like a type of pod that people would only eat during a famine if they didn't have any other food. Or some people think it might be like a prickly kind of pod that really only the pigs could eat because it was so prickly. But then the story goes on to tell us that this son actually didn't get to eat any of it. Even if eating it itself would have been shameful, he didn't get any of it. So he's sunken really low. He decides to go back to his father and try out his luck to be taken in as a servant. And the story continues. When the father saw him, Jesus said that he was filled with compassion and ran towards his son. And to us, that might sound like a normal thing. My husband runs to his sons all the time. But in that time and culture, an older man would never, ever run? Because running would mean that he had to lift up his tunic and show his bare legs, which was seen as a very disgraceful, as a shameful thing to do. The story also tells us that he had hired servants. So most likely this man had some wealth and perhaps was well respected within the community, which would even add to the fact that running was not a likely thing for him to do. So you could ask yourself, why did he run? Why did he run? Kenneth Bailey is a Christian theologian and an author who lived in the Middle East for 40 years, and he offers a bit of insight into some meaning here. He writes the following: If a Jewish son lost his inheritance among the Gentiles and then returned home, the community would perform a ceremony called the kezazah. They would break a large pot in front of him and yell, "You are now cut off from your people." And the community would then totally reject that person. So why did the father run? He probably ran in order to get to his son before he entered the village. The father runs and shames himself in an effort to get to his son before the community gets to him, so that his son does not experience the shame and humiliation of their taunting and rejection. The village in that time would have followed the running father, would have witnessed what took place at the edge of the village between father and son. And after this emotional reuniting of the prodigal son with his father, it was clear to everyone that there would be no kezazah ceremony. There would be no rejecting his son, despite what he had done. The son had repented and returned to the father. The father had taken the full shame that should have fallen upon his son, and had clearly shown to the entire community that his son was welcome back home. So after running toward his son, which was an unusual thing, the father actually embraces him and kisses him. And kissing was really only appropriate to do for family members, for close friends. So this is the father telling him, well, you're my son. He gives him a ring, and most likely this would have been a family ring, a symbol of reinstatement of sonship. Craig Keener, a New Testament scholar, put it really well when he wrote, "The father was saying, I won't receive you back as a servant. I will only receive you as a son." And I think this is just a wonderful picture that Jesus gives us of God's fatherly love for us. God in Jesus took the full shame of what we deserve on himself on the cross. Just like this father in this picture who takes the shame on himself, God does the same for us so that we might be reunited with him. A story comes to mind of a friend who once told me that most of her life she doubted between either praying to God a lot and maybe she would get to find him, or perhaps on the other hand she was too sinful to be saved, and at some point she just gave up. She didn't want to always be doubting whether God was happy with her or not. And she didn't always want to be searching for God, but never finding him. And that lasted a few years, and eventually she did start going back to church, simply because she liked the people, so she hung around. And here's what she said. This has stuck with me. "That was the first time that I really saw that it was the other way around of what I've always thought. I thought that I could search for God forever and maybe find him. But that wasn't it. It was God who had been searching for me all the time. And he was asking me to accept that. And he was loving me so much. And that was his biggest wish for me, to believe in him. And that's where I started my adventure with God." And I think that so often we think that we're the ones searching for God and doing the right things, and then maybe we'll find him. Or perhaps we think that, like the son in the story, we're too sinful to truly be redeemed. But like the story of my friend, the truth really is that God is searching for us, for you. And like the father in the story, he's running toward you with open arms, wanting to embrace you, to welcome you, not as a servant, but as a son, as a daughter. In the words of the Bible, we love because he loved us first. 1 John 4, verse 19. So I hope you're encouraged today just to know that God loves you first. irrespective of what you do, what you have done, he loves you first, and he wants to welcome you as his son, as his daughter.